Let's look at what the term Renaissance is. It derives from the French for rebirth. It's the name retroactively bestowed by 19th century thinkers who distinguished the era by its revivals. The reason why it is named the English Renaissance because of its apply to the cultural revival and poetic evolution, starting in the late 15th century and spilling into the revolutionary years of the 17th century, stands as an early summit of poetry achievement, the era in which the modern sense of English poetry begins.
The English Renaissance was cultural and artistic movement in England dating took place roughly from the late 15th to the early 17th century.
The beginning of the English Renaissance is often taken as convenience to be 1485, when the Battle of Bosworth Field ended the Wars of the Roses, the civil war for control of England, and inaugurated the Tudor dynasty. Once the Tudor took the throne, things got more stable.
Then reached a cultural summit during the 45-year reign of the final Tudor monarch, the charismatic Elizabeth I, 1558 to 1603. The Elizabethan era in the second half of the 16th century is usually regarded as the height of the English Renaissance.
Humanism, or Renaissance humanism, was an intellectual movement that celebrated the advancement of humanity, with a renewed interest in the classical Roman and Greek world as its basis. Greek and Roman models, renovated for modern purposes, were especially crucial for poets defining or defending the art.
Literatures. The periods produced some of the most celebrated literary works in English language. William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, Ben Jonson, and Edmund Spenser were among the prominent playwrights and poets who contributed to this era. The peak of English drama and theatres is said to be Elizabethan age and Golden Age in English history, where the art, drama, and creative work flourished. In terms of drama, the English Renaissance was the golden age of English drama, with the development of Elizabethan and Jacobean theatres. Shakespeare plays such as Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet are regarded as masterpieces of the world literature.
Edmund Spenser was one of the famous poets of the Elizabethan age. He was born in East Smithfield, London, around the year 1552. Spenser is often remembered as one of the most important poets in the English language, using an interesting writing style that became known as the Spenserian stanza and a voluminous vocabulary. Best known for his epic poem, The Faerie Queene, which he wrote for Elizabeth I.
The Faerie Queene is an English poem by Edmund Spenser. Book 1 to 3 were first published in 1590, then republished in 1596 together with Book 4 to 6. It is one of the longest poems in the English language. It is also the work in which Spenser invented the word form known as the Spenserian stanza.
Spenserian stanza, verse form that each stanza contains 9 lines in total, 8 lines in iambic pentameter, followed by a single Alexandrine line in iambic hexameter. The line scheme is A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C.
A gentle knight was pricking on the plain, white clad in mighty arms and silver shield, where in old den of day wooded dead remain, the cruel marks of many a bloody field. Yet armed till that time did he never will, his angry state did try his foaming bed, as much disdaining to the curb to yield. Full jolling knight he seemed, and fear they said, as one for knightly jout and fear encounter fit.
On a literal level, the poem follows several knights as means to examine different virtues, and though the text is primarily an allegorical work, it can be read on several levels of allegory. including as praise of Queen Elizabeth I. The fairy queen was to fashion a gentleman or a noble person in virtuous and gentle discipline.
Book 1 Center on the virtue of holiness as embodied in the Red Cross Knight, who traveled together with his lady Yuna to fight monsters. Then they separated after the Red Cross was convinced by Archimego that Yuna was unchaste.
Book 2
Centered on the virtue of temperance as embodied in Sir Gawain, who discovered a woman killing herself after having her love killed by witch Acacia. He then vowed to average them along the way, resisted violence and lust.
Book 3 Centered on the virtue of chastity as embodied in Britomart, who went to rescue Red Cross Knight, while Arthur and Guyon rescued Florimel. Upon saving Red Cross Knight, Britomart and Sir Saturn joined Arthur to fight Florimel. Resisting sexual temptation along the way, the Britomart sets alone and meets Sir Scudamore and saves his captor, Lady Amoret.
Book 4 Scudamore was convinced by Aid that Britomart ran off with Amoret. A 3-day tournament is then held by Saturn, where Britomart beats Arthigo, and Arthigo falls in love with her upon seeing her face after her helmet was removed. Britomart also recognizes him as the man in the enchanted mirror.
When Scudamore discovers her gender, he realizes he was wrong and asks for Amoret. But by this time, Britomart has lost her. It was discovered later that she was abducted by a savage man in his cave. She was eventually saved after darting out. Later, Arthur and Amoret then come across Scudamore and Britomart. The two lovers are finally united. Book 5
Centered on the virtue of justice and embodied in Sir Arthigo.
Book 6
Centered on the virtue of courtesy as embodied in Sir Carador.